Working with the University of Oslo on the DHIS2 software. Also been part of this facility registry group since its inception. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Given who we have here, I think it might make sense for people to comment if there was anything specific you were hoping to discuss today, or if we should, in general, continue with the threads that we were having before. One of them was discussing some improvements and adjustments to the FRED API. There has been this like a generic facility data exchange API that was determined between the industry groups that have participated in these calls. And also I wanted to ask you if you had been seeing any of the discussions around OHIE, if that is of your interest. I don't think that the providers and service discovery thing is necessarily germane to the conversations at least we've had with Jorge and with Stefan, but we have Derek here, who is like the editor of that profile, if in case there's any questions. So what I wanted to mention, are there any things that any of you wanted to or expected to get out of today's call?
Yeah, I'd spotted this provider registry link on the agenda of the call. And I thought, particularly given the work Derek has been doing, and I thought Carl might have been on, that would be useful to discuss what impact that CSD work might or might not have on what we're doing here. Obviously, there's some impact. There's talk of supporting another XML format and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me just go back here. So I don't know if Carl will show up or not, but definitely Derek, let me see if I can describe this, and you like interrupt me if I'm getting it wrong. So the CSD profile is a standard profile that aims to integrate some of the common queries that happen between providers, organizations, and facilities, and schedules, being able to answer questions such as, where is the nearest facility that can provide maternal-child health, and well, might it do that? Or where is the closest, for example, emergency and trauma services facility that is open now? And inquiries of the sort. And to do that, you have to traverse organizations, providers, facilities, and have references to schedules for different services. And CSD is kind of taking different standards that are related to all these entities and describing a profile, an exchange profile that clients could use to make these sort of queries. And this is a composite query, so it would tend to sit above a series of registries among these things. And Derek is like a spec profile editor for the IHE group, which is a group that ratifies these health-related standard profiles. And did I do a good job there, Derek?
I thought you did.
Great. Okay. And one of the things that there's two discussions. First of all, there's overall feedback going on to like how this profile works at large, right? And if you care about reading that feedback and status, you can see it here. I'm going to paste the links in the chat to your right in the Hangout. And if
Ed, I'm not sure if I didn't hear if you expanded the acronym at the beginning, but CSD stands for Care Services Discovery. So it's purely for finding things, and its role is to find interrelated information. So as Ed was describing, relationships between facilities, what organizations those facilities are associated with, what services they provide, and what care providers might be providing services at those places. The scheduling is optional. It's just an input into a simple FreeBusy kind of an input.
So so if you click on there and if you read the IT profile, we've kept copies of it in the code. Derek, is it okay if I paste a link to the FTP site?
Yeah, that's an open site, and okay. The June 10th version was submitted for public comment, you see me, my eyes keep wandering because I'm getting a bunch of feedback regarding that document. As it turns out, I used an outdated template for the document, so the editor's sending me, she's being quite forgiving.
Okay.
But there's some the footnotes are all wrong, or the footer's all wrong. And
Hey, Derek,
Well,
what is the timeline for the public comment period for this profile?
the public comment period will open. It's actually an official thing, so it's actually gone into a publishing workflow where the IHE will publish it to a broad list. All of the workflow to this point has been within the IT Infrastructure Technical Committee and the people that are interceding on that or advising on that committee, but it goes to the whole of the IHE membership and the public at large. That release is going to happen, I think, in the next week or two, and then the public comment period, I think there's a governance around how long it has to be, but it's 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a face-to-face meeting in Chicago at the end of July. Again, as part of their governance, all comments have to be dispositioned before it can be released for trial implementation.
Okay.
And the trial implementation release would be, I mean, assuming that the comments can be dispositioned, the trial implementation release would be in August or September, early September, and that's because there has to be time for people that are going to participate in Connectathons to prepare for that participation. And the first Connectathon is in January of 2014. The first eligible Connectathon for this profile, assuming it makes it through its next couple of gates, would be 2014, January.
Okay, great, thanks.
Good. Do you have any other questions regarding IHE?
Derek, I was going to ask, who is on the committee other than yourself who will be disposing of these comments?
The committee membership is, well, the committee membership is probably 50 people. Typically, we get about a dozen to a dozen and a half that come to the face-to-face meetings, and then about half as many again logging in by WebExes. So we have 20-ish of those 50 that would be participating actively. But all IHE members are eligible to vote on this, provided they're voting eligible. If you're not participating, you're not actually eligible to vote. In IHE, you have to have been a participant at 2 successive meetings in order to cast a vote.
Okay, that's the same as Oasis. That's the way it works there too.
Yeah.
And then you can lose your rights and then regain your rights by
participating again. Yeah.
Yeah. I know how that works.
All right. So, Bob, if you're okay, we can move to some of the issues. And given who we have here, I did want to discuss the XML endpoint one because we have the benefit of having you specifically, and also just then go through the list that we have and see if there's any interested input. And it's also good for Jorge and Stefan to kind of like see how the different aspects of the API evolve based on input. And as you get warmed up with what we're doing here, feel free to interrupt and interject at any time with questions and comments and so on. I mean, don't feel like spectators, and just jump in and start kicking the ball as well. Or hitting the hockey puck, sorry, Derek. Okay, so this is like the, right. We have it, I pasted it in the link to the right. And one of the things that I think was first on the list, and Bob, we could benefit from discussing, was exposing the XML endpoint. I mean, if there are going to be a lot of clients that are going to be using XML and they're going to be transmogrifying things, then exposing that natively would be good. And we have an XML endpoint because we have that GRSS endpoint, but it's not it's a strict kind of a schema. We haven't defined a strict schema. We're just using the GRSS extension schema for that, and I don't think it fully represents the spirit of what we defined with the facility object and the way to manage identifiers and all those nested elements that we've defined in Fred. So that people know what I'm talking about here, you can always see like the current version of the Fred API here. Boom. And I'm just going to share screen for a second here. So these are the issues that we have open around this. And Bob, I added a comment around the exposing the XML endpoint, which was, we probably need to, first of all, define the XSD for the facility object, right, in a way that specifies what we want to specify and leave open what we want to leave open. And then have a extension for the endpoint. And that comes, of course, with maybe MIME type differences. But other than these two things, I don't see anything else that's needed as a to-do to be able to have this, this feature. Is there anything else you think might be needed? I'm talking about issue number 65?
59?
No, 62.
62, I've been looking at 59. Look, I mean, we already have, I got to read through this issue in detail, but before I do that, I'll talk first. We already have I think even a relaxing description, right? A relaxng schema description of our at least slightly out of date iteration of the JSON. I mean, I would suggest that the easiest and most productive thing to do to start with is just do that. Let's try to incarnate that relaxing schema that we have and have a look and see what it looks like. Because the closer mapping we have between that and the JSON thing, then the easier our lives become in the longer term in terms of trying to maintain these things.
Yep, absolutely. And I was going to ask you, maybe you know where the latest relaxng file was at. Because I mean, it's a very simple XSD. I mean, one can whip it up. But,
it's not even an XSD. Yeah?
Oh well, it's an relaxng schema. Yeah.
That's what makes it simple. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that can be translated into an XSD using automated tools and the like.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say to take that as a starting point maybe, and then we'd have to create a schema which then tries to keep track of what we're doing with the various extensions we make into the API since that point.
Yeah.
Then alongside that, we have the parallel problem, I guess, of looking at how or if that will map to the schema that Derek has worked up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got lots and lots and lots of comments on that schema, but I don't think it's really the work of this group to discuss. I need to bring them up with Derek or more formally through his public comment process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the goal I think overall is to make sure that this facility object can be at least a complete representation of what information the CSD schema might look like. Like that we were also having discussion with Derek about like which elements may be mandatory or not. Yeah. Based on reality, like language and things like that, and those are now, for example, optional in CSD, and which allows us to make them optional. But so I think what we need to do is to, at least all the elements that are mandatory in CSD, we want to make sure that are well represented in this one, so that we know that somebody doing that aggregator of CSD data can use this as a source for that information.
Yeah, but given the sort of early stage of the CSD's life, I think there's going to be quite a bit of give and take here. I mean, there's probably too much that's mandatory in CSD at the moment from my early playings with it. I think it's a little bit ambitious. We'll have to kind of, I think, meet halfway on quite a few things, but certainly our starting point should be just focusing on what we have and make sure we have an XML representation for it. Then go back and look at CSD, and if need be, try to twist Derek's arm about taking some things out or doing some things differently.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I
for
should,
people references, I'm going to show this on the screen for a second. Can you see my screen?
I should make an admission. The twisting my arm, I'm profiling an underlying standard, so it'll be an arm twist that I'll be happy to pass on to the HL7 folks. But I'm as a profile editor, you're profiling underlying standards and not writing standards yourself. So one of the things that we have done is I've been able to say that some things that were in as mandatory, which is the code is R for required, I've been able to make them R2, which means required if known. And R2 means that if you don't know it, you can still create a valid record. And it means from an XML standpoint, in the XML schema, it's now min occurs equals 0, because if it is not known, it wouldn't be a required element in an XML instance, for instance. But that's about as much leeway as I've got in terms of taking things that are mandatory in an underlying standard and relaxing it from R to R2. Which I have done, and we did that on, I think, the language. Ed, help me out. We did that on language. We did that on geocodes. We did that on, I think, address. There were quite a few areas where we said, yeah, that's stuff that if you're in downtown Toronto, you know you can expect to have, but if you're in rural Rwanda, you just might not, or you won't always have it.
Yep, and that's part of the give and take, I think, that Bob is referring to that will happen. And I'm just showing them both side by side here.
Please press any key on your phone to remain in conference.
What?
No, there's a conference line associated with it. I'm going to press any key. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know whether I should press a key on my phone or not.
Everybody grabbing their phone. So yeah, that's going to be something that we kind of have to checkpoint, Bob, and thank you for bringing it up. But if you remember where that relaxng schema was, we can start with it. One of the things I wanted to discuss with you while we have on the line is we obviously have a very strong opinion that this beginning block of data and identifiers be defined. One of the things I wanted to suggest is to leave the properties bag as an open access any for the moment, and because each element in the properties bag might have its own subschema as we determined. So essentially, we cannot dictate that everything under properties will be a name value pair, and therefore, here's where other namespaces would come in and start dictating schema and values that are of interest in the XML world. What do you think about that?
I know, you keep flicking backwards and forwards from it. I think that there are certain properties which, if we... The whole idea of that properties block was that it was meant to be flexible and extensible.
Yep.
So nothing in the properties block should have a sort of fixed element name in the schema.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep. Or a fixed data shape. Like you see the difference between this one and this one.
Yeah, I mean, if you can leave it just completely, the whole thing, XS any. Though I think that has some implications as well for making, what you gain in flexibility, you're going to lose a bit with interoperability. I think we need to think about what we can sensibly constrain, whether we need to have a notion of types for coded lists, for example, or whether it's sufficient, everything could just be a string. I don't know, as I said, my starting points would be just to kind of instantiate some stuff off the relaxing schema that we have and start to look at what it looks like. I think it's a bad thing to start designing schemas without having instance documents.
No, of course. Yeah. And fortunately, we have plenty of instance documents now that we can start looking at. Like Scott actually ended up putting together all the data dictionary for the Tanzania facility registry, right? So you can, we have plenty of like examples, but there's also give and take there, right? For example, one of the things I was going to suggest for a future call is to actually, since services is a top-level entity that might be recurring and it might help CSD kind of queries, to actually have a specific schema for health services, because otherwise people start encoding it in all sorts of different ways, and we have to actually coach Tanzania a little bit still in that aspect. Just to give an idea to people what we're talking about, here's kind of like the current data dictionary of Tanzania facility registry. It has obviously identifiers and names, classifications, the admin hierarchy data, physical location and catchment information, lots of contact data, physical infrastructure like rooms and toilets and beds, health services, and it's interesting here because they have lots of like other of this type sort of services, and it's really annoying if you're trying to encode every option because they have a lot of that are not encoded, that are just like other. And and that's part of like the give and take that has to happen with them. And then like obviously workflow and then like I don't know what this user layer is, but it looks weird.
If you don't know, I don't know.
No, Scott would know.
Yeah,
Daniels have to know.
We were talking to him a little bit about how they would document if like a basic data entry staff recognized an error, how they could somehow enter that into the system. So we were starting to play around with what that might look like.
Oh, that's like you enter a ticket about the bad data of the facility in the facility itself.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's the first time I see that sort of stuff, but it's...
Are we guiding them regarding certain specifications or existing standards like the WHO Master Facility List draft or the HL7 location standard or any of those?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And there's others as well, like the... like how to have like location precision specifications and others, and but it's also it's a dialogue, and you kind of have to go hand in hand, right? If you say this is your destination, sometimes they say no, this is where we're at. But if you go, hey, look, let's try doing what you're suggesting. Oh, look how messy this looks. How about we do this? Try this out. And sometimes the standards are a good kind of like way to move that forward, right? But by showing how they can actually help is how we're moving it forward.
I'm just asking because separately through WHO, this is one of the countries, but there's a lineup around the block of countries that are looking for advisory services from their WHO officers around how to select e-health standards. And if we somehow get plugged into that process, then we just say, hey, see how much easier this is when you do it this way. And that turns the R objects into reusable objects.
Yep. So, and what I was trying to tell Bob is like, I agree, there's, the XSNE is basically saying we don't know for the moment, right? And we know there's stuff in there, but right now we can't describe it any further. Then we could always have additive, additive namespaces. Oops, where was I? Here. Oh, so many windows here. And then I think that if we can agree on some basic data types, what is the shape of scalars, what is the shape of vectors, what is the shape of a hierarchy, then we will be able to start encoding them right away. It might be worth it to do those examples. And You know,
Yeah.
I can commit to aggregating at least 1 or 2 examples of each to see how it is, and it will be a good time to also norm how some of those complex data types look like hierarchies and so on that we were having another issue in the discussion about. So I have a question very pragmatic for you. Do you know where that relaxng schema is, or do we have to like search for it in our archive?
I saw it on an appendix of a Word document.
Okay, yeah.
but probably if I cut and paste that out into Emacs, I could make it more sensible.
Yeah, yeah. Not a problem. Okay, so if we can't if we can find it, I'll ask the Mohawk guys to re-forward it. But it's again, it's not a complex one, and as long as we agree on this top part rapidly, I think the bottom one can, you know, we can decide where we draw the line about what's enough scope.
Yeah, I mean, if when we start looking at mapping this against the CSD stuff, then we probably will start constraining a bit more than the XSNE.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, it's always useful to start with to have a schema that matches loads of documents than to have a schema that doesn't match anything.
Yep.
Because it's too strict. But I'll dig that up as well. I know I've got the Word document somewhere.
Yep.
And cut and paste it out and see what it looks like. If I could get some... I can talk you offline on this, Ed, anyway, about getting some instance data from you.
Yep.
I think the Rwanda instance data is probably a critical one to be looking at anyway. But even looking at the Tanzania data will be interesting.
Yep. And then we have other data from other countries, but they haven't put as much love into curating their data dictionary. So it's more like a slap of data than you know, that's something that shows nicely the shape of how they want to maintain things. But it can tell you, but it still conforms to all the existing data types. So I'll see which ones are like fun or stressful to look at, and make a nice balance of those two.
Bob, which was the country's data that you were prototyping with? You said you'd worked with. Was it Nigeria?
I've got some old data for Nigeria. It's not very complete. I was interested in that not so much because the data is quite sparse. We're missing loads of fields.
But there was a lot of records, as I recall.
But we're talking about 40,000 facilities. So
yeah.
It was useful to look at that in terms of scalability. Because, I mean, one of the things we figured out that stuff that might work in Rwanda with 1,000 facilities just doesn't always scale to 40,000.
Yeah.
But now what I tried instantiating the demo data we have for Sierra Leone.
Okay.
Which, and I can't even remember how many facilities was in that now. Just to see what could be put into this CSD format and what.
I was going to say, selfishly, was that able to be shoehorned into that XML schema, or was it not? Or is that the source of some of your feedback on that schema?
Yeah, no, I've had to make a few min-occurs equals 0 on it to satisfy the schema. And I think that's going to be a reality if we want to work with the broad mass of messy, incomplete, and sparse data that we have out there in the world, and I think largely we do. We've got to sort of adopt the John Postel principle on this, and be liberal in what you accept and conservative in what you produce.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just showing here part of the Nigeria data set. It's like a lot of NAs, but you have from stockout information to canoe frequencies and donkey mule cart frequencies, emergency obstetrics, and obviously this is not at all curated into different layers of like coherent information, but it is a lot of data, and there's like 40,000 of it. I just searched for clinic here, but it's like filter a bit, Jamaga. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the X query over 40,000 works quite differently to X query over 500.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But it works. It works.
Yeah, just it comes with a cup of tea.
Yeah, no. I was doing basic iterative queries over that size data set in about 3 seconds.
A very quick cup of tea.
It's millions of cup of teas in computing terms. So okay, Bob, I can give you some example documents if you want to play around with that. Martin from our team was also was going to see if he could.
Uh-oh, looks like we lost Ed there. Hold on 1 second.
Apparently.
I don't think Ed knows he got lost there.
Yeah, 40,000 facilities, and Google said I can't scale and quit. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry, my whole browser died and I had to bring it back up. So so Martin from our team was also going to be maybe proposing some XSDs. I'll tell him to work with you, and so you guys can start playing with those example documents and so on. Is that okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
My time's a bit limited on it, but yeah, I'll try to make efficient input where I can.
Separately, Bob, if you've got, even though the official public comment period doesn't start for a week or 10 days, if there's anything you can send me, it's incredibly helpful to know where some of these underlying schemas from HL7 or from other organizations that have been pretty successful in the US and Europe and Canada are not going to be as successful in Tanzania and Nigeria and Rwanda. So that's all very useful feedback. And as soon as I can get it, that's helpful. And sometimes we can just make it an R2, but if there's things that are a bigger change than that, then OHIE has a mechanism for feeding back to the underlying standards organizations in a kind of a fast track way where changes have to be made to the underlying standards.
Yeah, well, we keep in touch with that. I mean, that's why I was trying to find out what the formalities are in terms of dealing with comments and how they are made. But I'm happy to do that bit informally as well.
But it has teeth when we bring it back formally. I just selfishly, as somebody who's put quite a bit of time into developing that specification, want to be able to reflect it and have it be as good as possible. But OHIE has a very formal and well-received method to go to the underlying standards organizations, and sometimes they can fast-track changes that are necessary. That gives us a lot of clout, which is a good thing.
And now that HL7 is opening up, we might even see those changes.
Well, we'll want the fast track because we won't see them for about a year otherwise.
No, I know that's fast in the standards world.
It is fast in the standards world, but OHIE I think can pre-adopt some things that it has to, and there's a mechanism for them to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean we've got to be pragmatic and use what works from those standards, and where they're over-ambitious, which I think they are in a number of areas, then we got to decide, do we take some liberty with the standard in order to get something done and at the same time feed it back for a possible current incorporation in a year's time, or do we sit and wait for a year before we can effectively use the standard? I think that's
yeah, that's what the pre-adopt path is for. Is because I don't think hovering for a year is something anybody can be expected to do. I just think that if we, if PEPFAR is going to be embracing these standards on a going forward basis, we have to have a mechanism to fix them. Because if some of these standards just aren't the right horse for the course, it's not going to. we're going to be up against it in terms of any kind of initiative that's trying to broadly embrace them.
Yeah, and when you talk of we, I think it's very important that the we in this context is the sort of developing country participants.
Exactly.
And this is a big problem with most of the ISO committees, for example, with the dependence on face-to-face meetings and the like. It's very, very difficult to participate.
Yeah.
IETF have a slightly better model. OASIS has a slightly better model. If they're really serious about expanding the scope and the coverage of standards, they're probably going to have to review quite a few things around how participation works, what the forums are, how much you do over teleconferences, and all of those sort of things. There's a lot of implications.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they know them.
They know them. Some of the standards bodies know them and care, and some of the standards bodies know them and don't seem to. I think it's going to be, I think that there are going to be a family of standards that are very appropriate for use in developing country context, and then another set of them that just won't be as helpful.
Yeah,
that's my sense.
And as you say, there's two axes of criteria there. There's the technical axes, but there's also the axes of practical ability to participate. Good.
Yep. Hey, related to this, Bob, one of the things that we'll have to decide when we're doing that relaxng schema is how to expose the hierarchy data in the thing. So there's two dimensions to that. One of them is saying where in your hierarchy, facility A is. Are you within, this country, this province, this district, and so on. And then another thing is referencing. Being able to reference that hierarchy in its completeness. And the latter, I think, is more of a thing about pointing to the schema of the data rather than the data itself. But I wanted to ask you, Matt posted this here as an example of how DHIS does it. And I wanted to ask you if this is something that is like the most awesome thing that you guys have done, or if you think there's ways to improve this. And also how we should brainstorm now a little bit how we expose that in that XML XSD, because that's one data type that right now we're just referencing it as a coded value where there is a hierarchy and a tree of coded locations at different levels and so on. But when that is referenced, you're just referencing, so to speak, as a foreign key, the key of the element in the hierarchy that you're pointing to. So it's just like it's a scalar value. There's no like complexity behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem there is what you have basically is it's like an SQL dump, right? Of the org unit association table. So it's just a dump of disassociated links.
Okay. Oh, here what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the hierarchy is kind of implicit.
Yeah.
When you, the ID of what you see there is a flat list, but the ID, where's your parent ID? That's not the way we do it. No.
There's no way to build a tree from this other than from order, right? Looking at 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but you should have a parent ID in there, so that each node also has a parent ID, and that also has its UID.
Mm-hmm.
And so the hierarchy is effectively a fixed tree. I mean, one of the downsides of that, and we've all had these discussions many times, is the fixed tree or the one true hierarchy is actually a serious limitation.
Yeah. No, and in the facility registry, there's nothing indicating that limitation. Actually, you have you could have many hierarchies in parallel and so on. But what we're trying to do is how do we represent at least one, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying, because I was kind of feeling the same things you just mentioned, but I wanted to ask before commenting. So maybe we can propose something. Is there any downside to actually just using the foreign key reference, saying, look, there is such thing as a hierarchy that has elements in it with ID M9 whatever, and I happen to be at hierarchy item M9 whatever, and then whenever I'm querying that, not have the whole ancestry mandated. Like we're trying really hard to not like return dumps of data without being requested explicitly.
I'm just trying to figure out, do I understand what you're saying? That
so let me give you an example here, if it helps.
I mean, you're talking here. I mean, there's sort of separate issues really. How you implement or persist that hierarchy, and
which is
how
not a specification, and it's not an exchange specification problem, right? How it is persisted.
Or how you describe it, how you describe a view of it.
Mm-hmm. I like it because even in Rwanda, they have like the two hierarchies, the reporting one, right, which is the one that matches closely to the DHIS thing, and the field has a question mark. And then there's the admin unit one, which is the more kind of official province, district, whatever it is that comes below it, and so on.
Yeah, I mean the purpose of hierarchy in DHIS is purely to facilitate the aggregation and uprolling of data. Yeah.
Yep.
90% of the time that matches the administrative hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Not always.
Yeah, exactly.
And often it's because the kind of administrative hierarchy is designed for the whole country, cross-sectoral, for schools and police and health and what have you. But often, and Rwanda is a case in point, where the actual organization of health administration doesn't quite follow exactly those administrative boundaries for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, and specifically in the reporting hierarchy, you can actually see some, if you drill down and start looking at the specific names, you can see some of those differences. I think that, one of the things that we kind of were able to have flexibly is, to get flexibility with was first of all to say there isn't such thing as one hierarchy. There's many hierarchies of containers on the side, and, there's one which could be the health hierarchy, another one which could be the admin hierarchy, and so on. And basically a facility has a pointer to a node in each hierarchy saying I'm here, I'm there. That's to represent kind of like the containment things. And then if you wanted to represent like reporting hierarchies, like this facility is boss of that facility sort of thing, or this facility, I don't know, let's say refers to or sends, people to this laboratory sort of things. You can always do a reference by site, which is like basically like a pointer, right? Where you say one facility is pointing to another facility.
You're talking about referral patterns there, Ed?
No. I'm just talking about links between facilities.
But in fact, I mean, Derek is right. We're talking of hierarchies, but hierarchy is probably too restrictive a shape, really. I mean, there can be graphs of relations between facilities, which would incorporate things like referral, I guess.
Yeah, I don't want to mess this one up. Oh, but it's a staging site, so I can. So you could have a nice new pointer, which is and this is just a field that is a selector for another facility in the collection, which is like an arc, like Bob was saying. And if you wanted to make these into kind of like lab hospital relationships, referral relationships, data reporting relationships, transport and infrastructure relationships is up to you. You can have many of these, right? I could have another one, which is, send sample.
So are these attributes of a facility?
These are attributes
No.
of a facility, which is a pointer to another facility.
Yeah.
Oh, but are these genuinely attributes of a facility?
I don't understand the question then.
I just haven't come across it in any schema that I have come across. I haven't seen the referral pattern as things that would be codified as attributes of a facility. Are they some of the things?
So that's why I said no. It's not a referral pattern. In this case, it's the example is a referral. In this case, the example is not a referral, right? For example, you could say something, send relationship. It's up to the user really to determine what that link means. It's not a patient referral, right? But it means
right,
that you can.
That's why I lost the plot a little bit, because I'm getting a little wrapped around the axle regarding what are the attributes of a facility that you would find in a facility registry, and what are the things that you would do, which would include like how you would use a facility registry versus what would be in the data model of one.
Yeah, for example, if records are being sent to some other facility and you want to capture that, it's a way of having a field that is validated that is a referral to another facility ID, right? A referral, sorry, a pointer. I don't want to use a referral word because it means something for the doctors. But does that help clarify?
Yeah.
And but the hierarchies as such are really a tagging system, right? You have a hierarchy of tags, right? And a facility can be assigned to Vilde, Kigali, Nyarugenge, Kimisagara, and there'll be there'll be a foreign key reference if you want to use database terms to one of those. And what we will be doing so far is, for example, if this if a facility is in a particular place in the hierarchy, let me show you what it looks like. Oh, this is a great example. Maybe not. Here it's easier.
My God, it's XML.
My God.
Jesus, what's easier about that?
No, it's just like the browser. I don't have the plugin here. For some reason, it's not working. Usually, I see it very nicely formatted with colors and stuff.
Oh,
but here,
yeah.
what I'm saying is like the admin code returns the key that was assigned to that. So here, for example,
Please press any key on your phone to remain in conference.
Sorry, let me disconnect them.
She's not adding much value, I have to say.
I haven't been talking very much.
She comments every now and again.
Yeah.
I thought it was the NSA.
That's a very nervous laugh from Derek then.
No, it makes me laugh. I saw a fantastic Facebook cartoon from somebody that had the new Facebook security policy is share with my friends in the NSA, share with just the NSA, share with me in the NSA, share with just the NSA.
That's good.
Yeah, okay. So what I was trying to get to here was that the hierarchy has the keys here. And unfortunately, in this case, the keys as it was uploaded by them wasn't the actual province keys, that are 01, 02, 03 in Rwanda, but were actually kind of like caps lock representations of the names. So we probably need to couch them to like bring that back a bit. But it's just like if you look at the fields, it just gets represented as a scalar that is a pointer to the to a hierarchy. And that's kind of the things I think, Bob, we need to start working in the XSD, kind of like if it is a pointer to a hierarchy, we can actually do a type, even though it looks like a scalar, knowing that it is a pointer to a hierarchy could actually add a bit to the semantic interoperability of it. Although that should be really determined by a query to the metadata structure of the facility, not necessarily the data structure itself. But I mean, 6 or half a dozen. We can look at examples and see what looks better.
So this might be naive on my part, but if I can understand, the structure of a hierarchy is not a part of the data associated with a facility. Is that correct?
Right. There are data structures where there are hierarchies, multiple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a facility can refer to an element in a hierarchy, just like you could refer to an element, how to say it, in a combo box, right? And it just so happens that the items in a combo box are in an ordered list. Here, you can refer to items in a combo box where the items happen to be in a tree, right? And they have relationships amongst themselves.
Right, so I'm trying to think of it as in the data aspect. So the hierarchy is separate and has a pointer to the nodes, but the nodes themselves can be a part of any number of hierarchies. So they themselves don't store information about the hierarchies they belong to. Is that correct?
Right. They just say where they are in that hierarchy, if anywhere at all.
Right, so I would imagine that what we were talking about before about networks, or saying that you communicate with other nodes in some aspect, is just, so a hierarchy is a type of network. So you can have mesh networks, and so in that case I would imagine that that network information, just as you don't store the hierarchical information within the node itself, it's separate. And then that way you can have any number of networks that a node is associated with.
Right. You could say, and there's one network, for example, that could look like where to send your patients in case of emergency, and that's one network. Another one could be where do your medicines come from, right? Or which warehouse supplies, and that could be another network.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just going back to the comment earlier about, is that an attribute of the facility itself? Which it sounds like if you treat it just like any other, if you treat a hierarchy as generically as just a particular type of network, and you're treating hierarchies that way, and hierarchies aren't an attribute of a facility, then any other type of network would not also be a attribute of the facility. Yeah,
I think I think there's two ways of encoding this kind of information, and probably the good way and the bad way, in a way. I mean, you can have simply a flat list of facilities, right? And in some ways that the facility registry scope, if it was simply to define the list of facilities, it would make its life easier. Then external to that, you have an external structure which describes, or other, could be RDF or what have you, which describes relationships between facilities. The alternative, and we kind of got this as historical baggage in DHIS, for example, where a facility has this parent attribute, means the kind of the hierarchy is hard coded in the node itself. I think is less flexible. So yeah, we probably shouldn't look at having hierarchical information as part of a facility node at all.
Well, it is part of the data model. The standards-based data model, which I got from HL7, I think, does have an attribute for organizational ID, which basically says, what is this facility's relationship in an organization? And that can be org ID is a recursive thing. So what I was looking for in this discussion was just, and it's possible to have a single geographic facility sort of have different services offered out of that facility associated with different organizations. So if we think about a physical location, a district hospital or something, there could be a faith-based organization that's operating services out of that facility. There could be a ministry initiative that's operating out of that facility. So that capability is in the schema already. What I was interested or curious about is whether or not this whole premise of all of the other possible networks, your supply chain network for drugs, your referral network for labs, and all of those things I can't imagine are attributes of a facility. They're applications that manage supply chain and applications that manage lab ordering. I'm sure would make use of the facility information, but somewhere we have to be able to draw the line between what's in a facility registry and what are all of the things that an application might do that would make use of a facility registry. And I'm not sure where that solve is.
Well, I think Derek, the part of
me.
the catch-up is that you're giving examples that would be managed in external applications, right? Like the care referral and all that stuff. Those would be. But what we're trying to do is like distinguish between a data type, which is a pointer to another facility, versus like a pointer to a hierarchy. And that's what we were trying to distinguish a bit. You know, if I had a logistics management system, I wouldn't store in the facility registry like who's sending supplies to whom, because that's what my LMIS is for, right?
Exactly.
Right, of course. Yeah, yeah. So we're on the same page with that. And I think what we were trying to say is like what Bob was referencing is that the site itself in this example has two like references to two hierarchies. One is like I am in, you know, this province, this district, this commune, and it says I'm in this commune, right? And there might be another hierarchy which is I like this flavor of ice cream, right? Which is a type of dessert. And you know, you could have a multiple hierarchies. So then you could do queries such as, you know, hey, who likes desserts, or who likes ice creams, or who likes chocolate ice cream as a hierarchical query, or like who's in this commune, who's in this province, who's in this district, and so on. But the data schema is not limited to having just one of these hierarchies. You could have multiple. And as it happens in Rwanda, the hierarchy that leads up to which commune you're in for the health system is different than the actual geographical commune sometimes in which you're at, you know, from the admin unit perspective. Or they have different granularity. So a sub-district has many communes, whereas, you know, the admin hierarchy doesn't represent that. So maybe, I mean, this is just a graphical way of representing it, and I don't know if what you would call that is that it is an attribute of the facility or not. But hopefully this helps clarify how the hierarchy fields are got. The point is that you have to be able to support more than one.
Yeah, I mean, the ice cream example is not all that useful. In terms of helping my understanding, anyway. I suspect that, like in all of these things, we're probably going to end up doing both. There is a case, even if it comes to mapping against things like DHIS's legacy model, this HL7 attribute that Derek was referring to, where you have this kind of implicit recursive org unit, organizational unit that you belong to. Those kind of fixed hierarchies exist. I think they often exist for bad reasons or for legacy reasons. In addition to that, and necessarily external to that, it's possible to build any other kind of net mesh graph tree or what have you. Whether those are represented within a facility registry or whether they're represented in some other kind of system is kind of open to question. Just a better example than the ice creams. The one that is with public health facilities, they tend to be organized according to where they sit in their Ministry of Health reporting hierarchy. But you have other reporting hierarchies as well. If you have different donors involved, they cross-cut across sort of geographical district boundaries and say this group of clinics are PEPFAR clinics, or this group of clinics are Methodist clinics, or what have you.
That actually, the sensitivity regarding that kind of reporting is something that I was able to, without being on the wrong side of any of the standards, I was able to contemplate that donor audit reporting is something that does have to be supported. So, you know, the same service might be provided out of the facility by two different organizations. So the CSD schema, for instance, associates an organization with a service provided at a facility. So you can say there's maternal care services being provided that are supported by the ministry, and then there's PMTCT services which are supported by PEPFAR, and PEPFAR requires auditing on its hierarchy going on up, and the ministry might require reporting separately regarding its for the funds that it's putting in place.
Yep, and I'm trying to show a little bit Rwanda, for example, has that as a flat list, right? Because they haven't needed to go into such fine-grained things, and they have non-affiliated ECPAF, CRS, GTZ, etc. as part of the data dictionary. And that's just did not require a hierarchy. I'm trying to remember where in Tanzania's one they had like similar data. Not regulatory status, not operating status. Ownership detail, well, I guess it's just a text in this case. Scott, you've been working with them on the data dictionary. How were they planning on resolving this? Do you know yet?
Yeah, it hasn't come up. I think the ownership detail is probably the one thing that is similar to that. But I think this is a good point to bring up with them to see how they're thinking about it or if they've thought about it yet.
I remember that. I remember that they had more in their document, but it was kind of confusing. And then we did this as a placeholder to saying, okay, let's park this. Kind of let's put a text field until they're ready to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's sort of level of granularity which kind of looks like it makes sense when you start making schemas or drawing trees. Don't make much sense in the field where you've got much sparser data. I know one of the approaches that they've talked about in Kenya is kind of just using a simple ratio. So in a particular set of facilities that 30% of the service is provided by PEPFAR funded projects, the other 70% provided by others, and then they just average it out.
Right. It's more to prorate bank accounts maybe and performance-based financing and stuff like that.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm sorry, we're
gonna have to run out. Bob, I wanted to just write up the conclusion of this. I'm just gonna add a note. Where was I? I was just gonna add a note that we're gonna be suggesting some examples. And but we did agree that supporting multiple pointers to multiple hierarchies is something that we would support, and it would be part of doing the work for the XSD to determine if this needs further typing or if just like a foreign key reference is okay. Is that appropriate in your mind?
Repeat.
All right, why don't I do this? I will add my notes, and then you add your notes, and if you feel, if you want to correct my own, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I think, Ed, are we at a good point to wrap up? I think we're over by about 10 minutes already, so.
Yeah, so it's an excellent point to wrap up, and we're going to be we're going to be tagging these a bit to see what needs to happen in the next round. I would like if you guys have Jorge and Stefan, if you have GitHub accounts, you can press watch up here, and you'll get subscribed to this as if it was an email thread, and then you can actually reply to emails and add your opinions to things. Or you can decide not to do that and fill your inbox in the NSAs, and just click on the things you like here. And and just comment on it using the user interface.
Quick question before we wrap up. Sorry I joined late. I was on another call with Zimbabwe, and the idea of a facility registry in Zimbabwe came up. I know they have a DHIS installation there, but I don't know if it's actually been fully deployed. Is there anybody that I should be in contact from the facility registry group? Kind of coordinate.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I can follow up with you, Carl, to start that thread.
Yeah, Carl, you should keep tabs with me as well. I'm going to be in Zimbabwe probably in about 2 months' time, and I know this issue has emerged there.
Okay, I'm going to be there July 9th through 18th, so
I'll miss you.
If you want to, all right.
Thanks, everybody. I apologize. I have to sign off.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Me too.
Bye.